This building behind me, Queen's Park, has been the centre of Ontario's government for more than 130 years. Inside these walls, governments have risen and fallen. Elections have been fought and won, and occasionally called earlier than expected. Tonight, as Ontario once again heads into an election called before it was legally required, we look back at the history of Ontario's government, the times premiers have taken a gamble by calling early elections, and what this moment means for the future of the province. Ontario's first election was held in 1867, the same year Canada became a country. The province's first premier, John Sandfield Macdonald, led a coalition of conservatives and moderate liberals governing at a time before formal political parties dominated the landscape. But even in those early years, elections were fiercely contested, and the decision of when to go to the polls has always been a matter of political strategy. By the late 19th and early 20th century, Ontario's elections had settled into a familiar rhythm. Governments typically serve full terms before going back to the people for a fresh mandate. But as political parties became more organized, leaders began to realize that the timing of an election could be a powerful tool, one that could secure power for years or bring it to a sudden end. One of the first Ontario premiers to successfully use early elections as a political strategy was Mitchell Hepburn. Elected in 1934, Hepburn led the Liberals to a commanding victory during the depths of the Great Depression. 3 years later, he decided to call an early election. Why? Because his party was riding high in the polls, and the opposition was in complete disarray. It was a calculated move, and it worked. He won another majority. But not every early election is called for the same reason. In 1967, John Robarts, the progressive conservative premier, called an election a year early, not to gain a bigger majority, but to secure his legacy before retirement. His government had introduced major education reforms and infrastructure projects, and he wanted to go out on a high note. The result? Another PC majority. Sometimes, though, an early election can backfire. Perhaps the most famous case in Ontario's history was in 1990, when Premier David Peterson made what turned out to be a fatal miscalculation. Peterson had led the Ontario Liberals to a landslide victory in 1987, forming a majority government after working with the NDP in a confidence and supply agreement. But in 1990, just 3 years into his mandate, he saw an opportunity. The polls showed his party was still popular and an election wasn't required for another year. So he rolled the dice. He called an early election, confident Ontarians would give him another term. Instead, voters punished him for what they saw as political opportunism. The Liberals lost badly, and in a stunning upset, Bob Rae's NDP took power. The 1990 election reshaped Ontario's political landscape. The NDP, which had never formed a government in the province, suddenly found itself in charge during a global recession. Meanwhile, Peterson was forced to watch from the sidelines as his gamble cost him everything. The next decade saw even more political upheaval. After the NDP struggled with Ontario's economic downturn, voters turned to the Progressive Conservatives and Mike Harris in 1995. His government, focused on tax cuts and spending reductions, faced heated opposition but managed to win re-election in 1999. Unlike some of his predecessors, Harris waited the full 4 years before calling his second election. And that's the difference. Sometimes early elections work, and sometimes they don't. It all depends on timing, public sentiment, and the issues of the day. And that brings us to today. Doug Ford has now joined the ranks of premiers who have decided not to wait until the legally required date. His government is facing economic uncertainty with proposed U.S. tariffs threatening Ontario's manufacturing sector. By calling an early election, Ford is seeking a fresh mandate to tackle these challenges head-on. But will voters reward him for taking action, or will they see it as an unnecessary gamble? All of these political decisions, successful or not, have played out here at Queen's Park. This building has been the heart of Ontario's government since 1893, standing as a symbol of democracy in action. It has witnessed political triumphs and devastating defeats. It has seen majority governments and minority coalitions, economic booms and recessions, stability and upheaval. And tonight, it witnesses another chapter in Ontario's democratic story. As Ontarians cast their votes, they aren't just deciding who will lead the province for the next 4 years. They are shaping Ontario's future, just as generations of voters have done before them. Will Premier Ford's decision to call an early election prove to be a masterstroke or a mistake? That's up to the voters to decide. For now, back to you in the studio.
Hello and welcome to Rogers TV. We're here in the Kitchener studio and we're going to do hyper local elections for the Ontario election. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to cover 9 ridings. You're going to start seeing the polls that are coming in right now. But the 9 ridings that we're going to deal with locally on our show tonight are Brantford-Brant, which Dave is from, Cambridge, Guelph, Kitchener Centre, and then we're going to cover Kitchener-Conestoga, Kitchener-South Hesper, Perth Wellington, which is where the riding that I'm from, Wellington, Wellington Halton Hills, and Waterloo. So joining me on my right is Laura May Linto, and she's former MPP for Kitchener Centre. She was elected in 2018 and re-elected in 2022. She is a professor at University of Waterloo. We just talked about it. And she has a doctorate in philosophy. So did your philosophy have anything to do with politics?
No. And so my doctorate was in education.
Okay.
But yeah, had nothing to do with politics. Nothing I've done has had to do with politics, except for when I was elected.
Except for when you did politics.
That's right.
Well, we'll get into that. And David Levac to my left, and hopefully on your left on the screen as well, former MPP for originally in 1999 when Dave was elected was called the Brant riding, but now it's Brantford-Brant. He also was re-elected 4 additional times, 2003, 2007, 2011, and 2014.
18, 14, and then I retired at 18.
Yeah. He retired in 2018, so congratulations on that. 41st Speaker of the House as well, so that must have been an incredible experience.
What a journey. That was an amazing job. Best job in the entire political spectrum.
But they probably told you how to dress.
This is the reason why I'm wearing this.
That's right, okay.
Because all I had was black and white. That's all I could wear.
And today, as you can see, all I'm wearing is black and white. I tried to stay neutral. I had to leave my purple ties behind, my orange ties, my red ties, my blue ties, etc. So purely just black and white.
Very neutral.
It looks
good referee.
Yeah, and be a good referee. I got to get the stripes. Dave, you're also the Order of Ontario recipient as well. Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a great honor. My nominator surprised me and said, "I'm going to do this," and I went.
Wow.
Oof. And then when I got the call, it's even crazier. It was a wonderful honor, and I've been humbled by it. And then when they started to tell you what you did, I didn't realize what I did.
Yeah.
So
wow.
it caught up.
That's me. Well, kudos to you and congratulations on that.
Appreciate
and
that.
you can't see on the screen, but he is wearing his pin, or it's in his pocket, whatever one you want to believe.
My pocket.
Well, let's go in. We're just seeing some results coming in. The Progressive Conservative Party, the results so far, 73 seats. NDP, 21, 16 for the Liberal, 2 for the Green, and 0 for, what is the COM? Are they a Communist Party?
Everybody else.
It is the Communist Party, which is actually interesting. We'll talk about all the other parties as well, which is very interesting. Let's go to Brantford-Brant. We'll start off alphabetically. Will Boma.
Yes.
Elected in 2022, seeking to be re-elected as well as Progressive Conservative candidate. And he won by quite a large margin, 7,400 votes in the last election. So tell us about, I think Harvey Bischoff would be his biggest competitor, or what are your thoughts on the people? Ron Fox, Carly Sortis, Joshua Karen, James Carruthers, Mike Clancy, and Rob Ferguson. They've got quite a lot of people running.
Yes, I know most of the candidates. Some I have not heard of, and I don't know.
Did you just hear about them now?
I'm just hearing. When I looked over my paper, some of them are running for parties that don't have party status, as in the Liberal, which they don't have a party status. They're hoping to gain that. And as a matter of fact, if we go by what we have, they now got party status. That said, I've known Will for a long time. He was a councillor in the county, for the county council, volunteer firefighter, ophthalmologist, takes care of people's eyes. He's a learned man, a good man. Harvey Bischoff is originally from Brantford, was the president of the Toronto OSSTF, like the big guys, and retired and came back town. Ron Fox is a entrepreneur, and he owned a franchise, a couple of Tim Horton franchises, and these are all good people. I'm one of those weird guys that kind of get along with most of them, and understand that this is not about hate. This is about, let's share some ideas, let's talk, let's get going. The only one policy that I don't think is faring very well, at least, and I only speak for my riding, they don't like it when the candidate doesn't show up to all candidates' meetings. So
well, let's talk about this, because, and I'll throw it here, Laura May, the Progressive Conservatives said if you're an incumbent, don't go to candidate meetings. What are your thoughts on that?
It's been quite a problem, actually, because I think we'd be pleasantly surprised at the number of people that are watching the all candidates debates. And so on the one hand, you hear we want people to be more civically engaged, and then on the other hand, not all of the candidates are willing to participate in that engagement. And so I don't, I've always questioned why that would be the directive. And at the end of the day, you're not going to get new voters, and you're not going to get people engaged in our democracy if you're unwilling to share what your ideas are. And those all-candidate debates aren't about the fighting. They're literally about putting ideas on the table and letting people choose which ones they want and what direction they want for their communities.
Exactly.
Now, there's a fairness piece to put on the table. The fairness piece is, I've been at all candidates meeting where 10 people show up to listen to the debate, and 5 out of the 10 people
So we're just going to punch up here quickly.
Absolutely.
Ashland Clancy, sorry, you has
Ashland,
been, she's been elected in Kitchener Centre, so that's been confirmed right now as well.
Wow.
So that's your riding. So I'm going to come back, but so this is obviously topical. You did resign from your position,
Yes.
And they had a by-election in 2023. So just tell us about that, and then how she was elected at that time.
Absolutely. So I didn't have an intention to resign my seat, but one of the hardest pieces of being at Queen's Park is the amount of time that you're spending in Toronto. And at the time that I was elected, my children were too young to stay at home alone. And so the biggest challenge for me was actually childcare, overnight childcare. So I made the decision to resign the seat. The by-election happened, and people were shocked because the Greens took that seat. And it's interesting because in Kitchener Centre, I was the first NDP to ever get elected in that riding.
Wow.
And then it went from NDP to Green, and it was the first time. And actually, I think that's the only place where there's both a federal and provincial Green representative. And so Ashland was able to use that time between 2023 and now to be able to, make connections and that kind of stuff. And so now here we are, right?
Second, they have 2 seats.
They've got 2 seats.
We'll see how they come up in this election. Do you think they'll get more?
You know what? You never know. Like, this is the thing about elections, right? Like, you never know. You don't know who people are going to vote for. And one of the funny things is, you have your sign wars during the election. It's always fun to see how many signs are out there. This particular election, different because you'd have to put it in ice, and that was not what we were prepared to do. But the sign wars don't necessarily mean anything. You don't know what people are going to do when they actually get there and they get the opportunity to vote. So who knows? Who knows?
So why do you think in that area Green took it in 2013? And once again, what do you think their major drivers were where people resonated with them?
So I think part of what I saw, my experience in Kitchener Centre, was that the people of Kitchener Centre vote for the leader. They vote for the leader that they want, not the leader of the party, but leadership qualities. And the kinds of qualities that they're often looking for, people that are deeply connected in community. They're looking for folks that are willing to listen, people that will choose to be in community, speaking to somebody, picking up your phone and talking to somebody who's calling into your office, as opposed to fighting to be on air at Queen's Park at question period, for instance, right? And I think a lot of ridings are like that, but I found this riding to be particularly like that.
Voting for the candidate.
They were voting for the candidate. And I had a lot of people, even when I ran both times, people told me they were typically conservative, they were typically liberal, they were typically Green, but they were voting for me. And so I think One of the things with Ashlyn was that she was always really conscientious about that. She was always very grateful for the work that I had done prior and spoke about that. And so I think sometimes when you bridge that, that people will vote for you because they feel like you can represent them for real.
Well, Ashlyn, congratulations on your election, and Matthew Ray, and then also Mike Schreider as well that's our second Green Party.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
A very, very, very fine gentleman. I've gotten to know Mike over the years, and he's a guy that wants to work with everybody. He's made it clear, and I've seen it operate. I've seen it from the chair. He'll talk to ministers, he'll talk to the opposition, he'll talk to everybody, and he's looking for good ideas. He has good ideas himself. I think people are going to eventually start moving towards that. I have my own theory is that Canadians vis-a-vis Ontarians are not wanting to adopt the hate politics of today. I think we're trying to reject it collectively.
Just Jess Dixon, by the way.
And he's an example.
As well as another one.
Yeah.
But let's stay on the Guelph one as well. So
Sure.
he was the first
Yes.
person, the Green Party, ever in
Yep.
Ontario as well.
Yep.
So now we know that they have 2, possibly 3 seats coming up as well.
Yeah.
So
And I think they're working very hard to get their message out, because an awful lot of people, which again I don't like the kind of politics that gets played, is that he's irrelevant. Only vote for the Liberals, or only vote for the PCs, or only vote for the NDP, because those are the only 3 parties that have ever had government. So don't pay attention. That is so silly. It doesn't make sense not to listen to a guy like Mike.
right.
And quite frankly, if more people listened to Mike, they would get more ideas, and he would show support.
Absolutely.
And that's why the people of Guelph like him.
Yeah, exactly. And then let's go to my riding, Perth Wellington. Matthew Ray, congratulations on your successful election results. This is his second time running, 2022, that Matthew was elected. And just similar to the Brantford-Brant riding, there's a lot of candidates. So how does that, in your opinion, if you have so many candidates, does it somewhat, because we have our electoral process is not about the majority, it's about plurality, is it? Or you know the term I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can actually win by not getting you just have to get the majority of the votes, not over 50% of them, which is very interesting. But what are your thoughts on this one? Actually, in your area was going to be contentious because they were concerned that it would split the vote.
There's been so much talk about vote splitting.
Specifically in Kitchener Centre?
In Kitchener Centre, we were hearing that as well. But again, in Kitchener Centre, I think folks decided to vote for the person that they wanted. I always get worried about those conversations about vote splitting, because that means that you're not actually voting for the person that you think would be a good representative in your riding. You're voting for totally different reasons. And so what is the purpose of our democratic system? Well, but to vote for the person that you want to be representing you. And so I have big feels about that. One of the things that I have noticed, though, like I remember some of the debates that I had with some of the independent candidates, they also have really good ideas. Like, it takes a lot to put your name on a ballot, so they're not just putting their name on the ballot willy-nilly, but we don't necessarily listen to them unless they're attached to a major party, right?
Right, exactly. Well, we just talked about Kitchener South.
There's going to be a little bit of an interesting one for Hallam and Norfolk.
Okay.
Because Bobby Ann is an independent, ran as an independent.
Yes.
And now it's her second time as an independent.
She won as an independent.
Yes, and as a second time around, historically, independents tend to only have one shot at it, or two, maximum
And
two.
she worked for the Progressive.
She worked for Toby Barrett, who was the MPP of Hallam and Norfolk, and then the party assigned somebody else. They came in and assigned somebody to run instead of letting Bobby
That's very
run for the nomination.
It's not part of our
And they
nine,
did it
but it's
again.
interesting.
And they did it again.
They did it again.
They did it again.
Catherine Fife as well, congratulations on your election. Let's go to Kitchener South. And so we have Jess Dixon, who in 2022 successfully ran and received almost 40% of the votes. And Jess has successfully been reelected Conservative Party. Any comments from either one of you?
I did not. So I have many thoughts about what's happening. I do. I have many, many thoughts. I think that it's really difficult in a snap election for new people to come in. Like, there's a part of me that always wonders, even if they have good ideas and good policies and all of that kind of stuff, it's such a short turnaround time. Like, I was nominated 1 full year before the election.
Right.
And so I had a whole year to get to know people in the riding in a different way and all of that kind of stuff. It's a challenge. And so there's always, like, strategically, there is a leg up for the person who is the incumbent.
Which just was.
Which just was.
So we just do, and we'll talk about the PC have a majority government. So it's just now been verified, which it was the reason why, as you said, they pulled this snap, $198 million to do this election. You know the story. David, it's Premier Peterson. Tell us about his decision back in the day to pull a snap election and how it backfired on him.
I understand that that there was a very large debate in caucus, which you don't expose, but in caucus there was a very large debate as to whether or not he should be going. And when he finally made the decision, he got the feedback from the caucus, but the caucus wasn't particularly enamored. And when you make those kind of decisions in the introduction, you heard Tim Philp talk about sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work.
Right.
Well, before those took place, there wasn't a fixed election legislation. Now there's fixed election legislation, unless there's a declaration of war or crisis or something like that. So he kind of played a little bit of a game to go the early way. But he already had a supermajority.
Right.
And so the question I would have posed if I'm sitting in caucus or if I'm sitting in the House debating is, so explain to me again why you need one more seat than you've already got. Because you can make the decisions with the opposition saying a few things, but it doesn't mean anything because we're going to do what we're going to do.
Right.
Well, no, I've got to take on the Americans. Well, Canada's taking on the Americans. I appreciate the fact that Doug Ford is acting like Captain Ontario, which you're supposed to do. Historically, the Premier of Ontario steps up and says, we're going to help Canada, but he doesn't take credit for it by saying, I'm going to take care of Donald Trump. Donald Trump will squash him like a bug.
Right, it's a national issue.
So it's a national issue. So give me another excuse. Well, you know, I want a better mandate because the economy's not good. Well, no, if the economy's not good, is it your fault? So stop playing the games. You called an early election because there's a political advantage to do it. And he's taking advantage of it, and he's going to...
And obviously it won.
And he's going to win, and he's also going to lose seats, and he's going to gain seats. So, and the same thing with the NDP, and the same with the Liberals. That's how the game gets played. So that's meat and potatoes. I say it comes back to the individual that the community wants. Ultimately, they want somebody, they're going to get them. And they also punish governments that get thrown out. Like, they get thrown out. Parties don't win. Governments get thrown out.
Exactly.
And I'll take this party.
Well, it appears that they're not being thrown out of this time.
No,
we're going to go to Cambridge. So Brian Riddell, congratulations as well for winning Cambridge. You, again, incumbent in 2022. Can I go back to what Dave said, and just to get you started on this, a snap election. What were your thoughts? Would he fall, or did you think exactly what you said, most of the time they're just going to get the same seats?
Well, my first thought was, why? Like, why are we doing this? It's expensive. We're at a time where many of our ridings are seeing things like encampments popping up, people unable to keep their homes, people unhoused. We have all of these other things that we could be putting money into, but we're going to put it into this. It was already in his favor. It wasn't a matter of, the majority wasn't settled. He had quite a majority, and so I don't understand what else it could be but strategic for some other reason internally.
Right.
So that part was problematic.
But it is a risk. So
it's always a risk.
It's
always a risk.
Yes.
But there's certain times where the rhetoric that was coming from the party to begin with was more aligned with what people were saying.
Right.
And so I think that there was also a risk in waiting to see how
Exactly.
what would our response be to what was happening in the States? What would our response be to what was happening federally? And so we had to make a choice, and he made his choice.
All of those issues apply, and more. What about the RCMP report? What about, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So somebody sits back in a dark room in the
"Let's go
corner
now."
and let's figure it out. Okay, let's go now. And then they pull the plug.
Yeah.
And by the way, the legislation is reasonable, and it's a good piece of legislation that says you should only have this much time and should be evened out and often. But here's the real catch. The Premier walks into the Lieutenant Governor's office, and it's the Lieutenant Governor's office that says yes or no.
Exactly.
So it's not the
Lieutenant Governor's in
legislation, that's how it works.
Brian Riddell, who wants to talk about
Good guy.
him as well?
Good guy. I got to meet him a few times, and I think in terms of his service to the community, his reputation is there for doing that. He cares a lot, does an awful lot of work on the inside in terms of getting to know where his businesses are in the riding, the people in the riding, the groups in the riding. I heard that he has an awful lot of meetings with social justice people and stuff, so good guy.
Perfect. What do you think, if in Ontario alone, what do you think the issues that you're hearing people talk about that are important to them?
So there are a number of pieces of legislation that recently got passed that people were really concerned about. And I also think that that's part of a reason why you would have a snap election, because a snap election makes us forget the things that they did in the last time with the last group. So closing safe consumption and treatment sites was major in Kitchener Centre. Not putting enough money towards supportive and affordable housing was a major issue. Literally during my election in 2022, an encampment just up the street popped up. It was one tent, and by the end of the election, it was 60 tents. And that was a story that I was dealing with in Kitchener Centre that now is all across the province. I think that the discussions around affordability are really real. And what's happening in post-secondary education is really real. The underfunding of that whole sector, the underfunding of education is making people feel hopeless. And so one of the concerns that we have, or that I hear on the ground, is like, what happens now? So the Conservatives come in again. That's another mandate.
Right,
what
we're seeing
else
78 seats now.
Yeah, like what else is going to get cut? What is going to happen next? And that fear is palpable with folks that I'm talking to in the riding.
Right. You have a lot of electoral history. So now we see the Liberals they were not an official party, which you need 9 seats to do. It appears they have 12. What's the advantage to having an official party status?
Money.
Yeah.
Simple as that. If you're not a qualified party, you do not get a part of the pot that's put inside the legislature for each party to allow them to hire researchers, to have them do secretarial work. All of the research, everything that a party gets to have in terms of the legislative budget does not go to a party that does not reach recognition. It's changed several times. It changed 4 or 5 times when I was in Parliament. It went from 6 to 8 to 12 to 8 to 9. Like they flipped it around. And some parties, including my own, played some games with that in terms of not recognizing parties, which they could have said, we're going to change the rule to make it 1 so that you can now have party status. That's why they used to had the nickname for Andrea Horvath, the $1 million MPP.
Oh.
As soon as she got elected in a by-election, they got party status and they got their money.
$1 million, it sounds like. Mike Harris Jr., congratulations as well. The former Premier of Ontario, his father, was elected served quite a long time, 1981 to 2002. And then Mike Harris Jr., this will be his 3rd time, 2018, 2022, and then of course 2025. You worked with him or alongside him, if you will. Tell us your thoughts on why he was successful in winning his riding.
So it's, again, I go back to the way that this election has come about. I didn't anticipate major changes across the region, or to be honest, across the province. I could not imagine how that could even happen. There wasn't sufficient time to get out to speak to new people. So a lot of the support that people had in their ridings would remain the support that they had in their ridings. If you came in with a large majority of those votes when you first came in, then it was highly likely that you were going to keep that same amount of distance between you and the person that came in second, right? So that is interesting. But I also think there's a part of me, and I'm an eternal optimist, I say it all the time. There is no individual that I know that's going into politics to do harm. People are going into politics to do good things. They have different ways of doing it. They have different agendas. I think the hardest thing right now is whether or not the Conservatives, the individual Conservative members, are going to push back against some of the calls that the party will make. And I think that that's one of those questions that we have to have. I often say, and the party didn't necessarily care to hear me say it, but I had work I had to do inside my party. I was coming in with my own desires and my own understanding. I was speaking to different people in Kitchener Centre. Just because my background was different, I wasn't coming in from a political background, right? I was coming in from doing work in community. I was doing social justice work. I was doing equity work. So I would have to push inside caucus. Caucus is a lovely place. It can be challenging,
right,
like that, but that's the point of having those caucus meetings. The question now, as far as I'm concerned, is whether or not the Conservative members within this region, for example, will push for the things that we know that we need in this region.
This kind of election, called in the winter time, called in a very short period of time, always historically would favor the incumbent.
The incumbent.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why
well,
is
we're seeing some turnover. Liberals now have 13.
Yeah. So here's what take a look at the history of the person they're replacing. Mm-hmm. So that'll tell you a little bit more when you go in depth. So was it their first election, then they got knocked off, or was it their fourth time, or third time, or second time? So incumbency allows you to have, first of all, a team in place.
Yep.
The second thing it does is mostly have a name recognition. The third thing it has is usually they have money. Because it costs money to run elections. And the fourth thing that it has is familiarity. So the familiarity theme that I talk about sometimes is that they're familiar with the community leaders. They're familiar with the issues of the day. Yeah. Somebody coming new are bringing what their short-term piece is, and it's harder to build that into a momentum that gets them enough votes to win it. So if you knock off an incumbent, that is news.
You knocked off an incumbent.
I did.
That's news.
Gently. It was a gentle knock.
Catherine Fife, you worked with her because she had, congratulations as well to Catherine, originally elected in a by-election herself in 2012, 2014, 2018, 2022, and now 2025. Tell us why in her riding the New Democratic Party was successful.
Well, it's interesting because Catherine was actually the person that asked me to run.
Oh.
Yeah, and Catherine asked me to run because I happened to be hosting a summit. It was called the Eraser Summit on the status of race and racism on Canadian university campuses. And I was trying to explain to people that the political side of our world has an impact on what happens within those campuses. So I invited a panel of politicians to come as one part of the panel, and then people at the university were another panel, etc. And I remember she started calling me and asking me if I would consider putting my name on a ballot, because she had never seen somebody bring a whole bunch of people together like that to talk about something that nobody wants to talk about.
Politics aside, it was just let's talk about the issues.
Well, this is the thing. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, whoever is in power is actually in a position of privilege. So the election is over. Now they're doing the work. So I wanted them to be part of that conversation. And she came out. I think the thing that keeps Catherine in her seat is that she does actually show up. She shows up in community and she has those relationships. And so people know that they can trust what it is that she is doing and saying, and that she's going to do good on that, right? She's got the history.
Well, we're seeing no change on the Green Party. We talked about this earlier. So again, Liberals are up to 13 seats. Independent won, which will not be in our 9 sections here, but
I'm betting that's Bobby.
Yeah.
Bobby Ann from Alderman Norfolk.
we talked about her earlier.
Yes.
Actually,
Yep.
pretty impressive to, as you said, to get elected the second time is much more difficult.
Is usually more difficult, but the people of Alderman Norfolk, I think they're sending a very, very strong message. Do not mess with the local ridings.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what you've been
You
saying.
want to appoint somebody instead of somebody going through the process and letting the party inside of the riding association. They're not the politicians. They're the backbone. They're the people that, raise the money, make the phone calls, keep the party in between elections going.
Right.
You're telling them that you're going to take somebody and put them in there without us choosing? And they are sending a strong message. They're ticked off. I know people down there, and man, I'll tell you, I've never seen the numbers. Like, I saw some of the numbers in polling.
Yeah.
Right.
Like 89% did you like this? 89% said no.
Can we talk about, this is one of my things that is a concern, is voter apathy. What are your thoughts on why in 2022 in Ontario, the lowest in history voter turnout and participation? What are your thoughts, and what do you think it's going to be like this election tonight?
So actually, coming back to that question, the independent could also be Sarah Jama, because there was a similar story in Hamilton Centre where
Oh, that's correct.
Right, so Sarah was trying to run again for the NDP, and they opted for
Right.
somebody else and to block that nomination. But to me, that speaks to voter apathy, because when I showed up, I actually went to her nomination meeting, and that was not apathy. Like, there were so many people there from different levels of government because they saw the kind of work that she did. And so what I do think happens is that you have individuals that are willing to stand up and be leaders in that space. And when the parties try to come in and do what parties typically do, make you, read the binder, say the words, whatever, but they aren't interested in what's happening in community, that's where the apathy comes in, because community around them start to say, well, what's the point? And I think that that's something that we have to pay attention to. We often think about voter apathy and we make this assumption that it's the community's fault. Community has to be more civically engaged. Community has to do the work. The problem is the community. But that's not the narrative that actually gets the community to come out. The narrative that gets them to come out is for you to go and ask them, like, what is it that you want me to fight for? And the minute you start to fight for that, they show up.
Yeah, we do understand that the NDP did take Hamilton Centre, so it's most likely the independent is who you're talking about. This apathy, I want to continue on with this because you had numerous elections. Federal elections have the highest voter turnout. Municipal elections, the lowest. So why is that? And why is, if you will,
All I got to tell you is that at the municipal level, and my colleagues during my tenure understood this, I kept saying the municipality is the meat and potatoes of political life. If you have to understand that my sidewalks, my gardens, the cats that are doing bad things on my lawn, those are the things that Mr. and Mrs. Tim Horton get upset about. If you talk about $1 billion boondoggle at the federal level, most people go,
what is a boondoggle?
But if you talk to them about building this or putting this or closing this bridge or building a new bridge or something that's going to have an impact in your municipality, that's the place where it is. I was baffled by the turnout in our community in the last municipal, 29%. Like, it was
terrible.
So what we need to do, I want to tap into what you were saying. I think what we need to do is do way more discussion of the connect, not the disconnect, the connect. What do we need to do? Talk about it. Have people that have expertise in how do you talk to people about getting them engaged. Do you know how you do that? Talk about the things that impact them.
Like sidewalks.
What's the first thing that they talk about? Hospitals. We got to build a hospital. Why? Because my health care. It's mine.
It's a provincial issue.
But they say, no. It's got nothing to do with the millions and billions of dollars you're spending. I had to wait too long in the emergency ward. It's about me. So if we start connecting the dots with the politics and the politicians to those people that want those things to happen, we will have a vast improvement in our political system.
I agree.
So interesting enough, you mentioned Hamilton. Municipally speaking, Stratford actually had an incredible voter turnout for municipal, almost 44%, Hamilton 36%, London pretty low, 25% in the last election,
Right.
Durham 24%, which is really terrible because considering you're getting 62% out for federal elections.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is there any way they could make it easier in the voting process, in your opinion?
So one of the things that I do think is difficult municipally is how many things you're doing at one time. Like you're voting for, so here we're voting for the different regional councillors, you're voting, and there's different numbers of people that you're allowed. So there are a lot of people on the ballot. We were even talking about that in some of the ridings that we're looking at. There's independents that are on there. You've got 10 people showing up at one of these all-candidate debates. So in a municipal election where there is so much happening at once, I do think it can be overwhelming. And I know from my own experience that it didn't matter how many cards I put out with what different levels of government do, community just wants the thing done. So they call the one person that they know, so whatever number they get first, and they ask, right? But I used to always say to my staff, I don't care that that's what they're doing. Our job is to make the connections for them.
You got it. That's
Right?
the connection piece.
yeah.
And to me, that would improve circumstances. So
Absolutely.
let's study the high-end municipalities that you mentioned and ask them, how did you get people to come out? Or what do you think is causing them to come out? As opposed to looking at the 22%, 25, 29% and say, oh, it's too bad. It's terrible that they're not voting.
Okay, let me go with a crazy concept on this. In Stratford,
wait.
for the municipal election, you could call in a vote or you
Yeah.
could electronically vote from your home. You can't here in a provincial election. Why not?
I don't know.
And do you think if you were 21, would
yeah.
you vote from your
Well,
For your phone.
absolutely.
from your phone? Exactly.
Absolutely. And I even think, like, go back to the pandemic. Nobody wants to go back there. But during the pandemic, one of the challenges provincially was that we had to still figure out how to show up at Queen's Park. At the very beginning, when nobody knew what was happening, it was unsafe for us to go to work. And that meant that we couldn't actually hold any of those votes. And people were saying, can we not start to digitize anything? Like, we can't call in. We also found out that at Queen's Park, there was only one room that had access to whatever system they needed to be able to have us zoom in. And
We were
so
working on that. I was working on that.
And that was one of the problems, right? But it's a real problem because
And
now
you've nailed
here we
it.
are.
So we have a choice. It's either accept voter suppression and not fight to have voter suppression, or voter participation. What tools do we have for either one?
Yep.
We have laws and rules that both the United States is doing and Canada, but you suppress the vote, because if I suppress the vote, my party wins. But if you don't suppress the vote, somebody else wins. So what do you do to have them come out? You nailed it. What are all of the ways in which I can voice myself to the legislature?
Yep.
And the vote. I want to be able to use every tool in the toolkit. And you can't tell me that AI and technology can't protect it.
Yeah.
There's going to be hackers, I know, but I want them to vote.
Yes, exactly. And young people especially as well. We're going to have Ashlyn calling in very shortly, which is wonderful. I will warn the viewers up front, this speaker is horrible, so maybe I might have to redirect some comments. But I would actually throw it to both of you to maybe ask a question or just hear her comments as well when she comes on. One of the funny one, I think, was in your area, the party that was the not on my ballot. Do you know this?
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
How do you get an obscure
Party get involved?
and how do you get them listed?
The new rules,
Yeah,
they
tell
changed
me.
the rules slightly. The new rules are 2 people can sign a piece of paper and they can become an official party.
2 people?
2 people.
2 people.
So if you and I want to form a party, the black and white party or the colored black and white Bahama shirt party?
Well, here we're going to wait for
sign up right
Ashlyn to
now.
come up. But here's some names of some parties. This is why this is very interesting. The New Blue Party,
Yep.
the Freedom Party,
Yep.
the Ontario Party,
Yep.
the Communist Party, which I was surprised they had on screen. Of course, apologize. There is 7 candidates in there. The Canadians' Choice Party, the Electoral Reform Party, the Ontario Centrist Party, Ontario Alliance, and then there was 41 independents, by the way, that ran in this, which is really impressive.
Wow.
One, of course, has got into that, which is very, very impressive. 79 seats is serious because, of course, 63 is the majority. Let's talk about the electoral process. It's called first past the post. What does that mean?
So, don't look at me.
Okay. Then I'll turn to Dave.
51.
51 what?
50 votes plus 1. First past the post.
But is it actually not that? Is it not the person that just has the highest? So go with me for a second. Toronto ridings will have a lot more population than, for example, Perth, Wellington, where I'm from. So what will happen is they may have vast majority higher turnout for voters that would represent one party, and Perth Wellington could have a lower turnout, and their party both has a seat, period.
Correct.
But isn't first past the post, it's not 50%?
No, it's not 50%. It's the one vote.
Yeah,
It's the
highest.
one
It's
vote
plus one.
you need.
Exactly.
So it's plus 1.
It's plus 1, exactly.
Meaning if I had 10,000 votes and the person behind me got 9,999, I win.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, when it's single digit or sometimes even more than that, you can do an automatic recount, like just to make sure everything is above board, blah, blah, blah. I win by 1 vote, I win.
Yes, and it's been
And it
around
doesn't
for a
matter
long time,
percentages
though.
wise. Yeah. Well, that's how it ran for the longest time until people started to put their minds to it.
Perfect.
And
We're going to
recognized-
actually bring Ashlyn on as
sure.
well, so this is great.
Absolutely.
Viewers, I apologize again up front. The sound quality might be poor, but we do have Ashlyn on. Ashlyn, can you hear us?
I can. Sorry.
Wonderful. Well, we can hear you, so congratulations to you. That must be an incredible feeling. We can see you right there, so incredible feeling to be reelected. So tell us what your thoughts are right now.
Yeah, it's just so nice to be surrounded by family and friends and volunteers. We've had a great team. So much energy went into knocking on as many doors as we could and making thousands and thousands and thousands of phone calls. But I'm grateful to the people at Kitchener Centre for putting your trust in me for 4 more years.
Well, and you did the hard work, and with the cold weather, it wouldn't have been fun banging on doors.
Pardon me?
It wouldn't have been fun banging on doors in the cold weather.
No, definitely my toes will never be the same. But people were warm. They were generous, and they opened their doors to us. We definitely went through a lot of hand warmers.
So you won in a by-election. When you were coming up and they were talking about split votes and that, did you have any concerns in terms of what the results would look like?
Sorry, the sound is really bad. I don't know what's wrong with the. Okay.
We want to come to your party.
Can you
That's
repeat the
really what we're trying to tell you. You won in a by-election, and then there was just some concerns about some splitting of votes. Was there any of that discussion?
Yeah. This is not working.
Okay.
This is not working.
Not working.
Well, that's
Hold
fine.
on, just 1 second. Take off the sound. Just let me talk into the phone.
Thank you. I don't know what you're doing on there, but
No.
popping champagne corks, hopefully. When you won, did you pop champagne?
I was like too jittery to do anything. Honestly, it was a big deal.
Well, it was so old school for you. You won
I'm
so
an
many
abstainer.
times.
I don't
Okay.
drink. I don't drink alcohol. And
Pop the Fresca.
the champagne did get popped by other people.
Okay.
There you
So
go.
I had ginger ale in my champagne class. So
Nice.
we toasted. It is a good feeling. And what I've always tried to put myself into the position of understanding, you run scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we got Ashlyn back on, so
Wonderful.
we'll see. Ashlyn, I don't know if you can hear us.
That's better, yeah.
Perfect. My question was more about you won in the by-election, congratulations, and then again this evening. Were you concerned about anything? We heard talk of splitting the vote. So just give us your thoughts on that.
I think that's
always a worry when we see our electoral system that's so flawed. You know, like first past the post is not good for democracy. So I'm grateful that we have a strong show, but I do believe in electoral reform.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind me interjecting, congratulations, obviously. But I have to know something really important. Has Mike made you the deputy leader of the Green Party?
Yes.
There you go. I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank Mike for that, because it's a sign that he wants his party to be taken seriously, that they're going to be in for the long haul, and that it gives everyone an opportunity to have another choice when they're looking at candidates for election. So thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thanks, everyone.
And congratulations, a second seat as well, making history.
Yeah.
So that's great. So thank you very much. Any final comments?
Congratulations, Ashlyn, and thank you for coming on my show. It was really kind of you to spend some time with me.
Ashlyn,
I'm grateful for your coverage of this election.
thank you. A nice color green you're wearing tonight too. So congratulations. Get back there and celebrate.
Sorry about the sound, yeah.
Thank you. We're going to cut it off there. Poor sound. Could be this. You can't see it here. They're purposely hiding the speaker. It's so bad. But anyway, that's actually two green seats where there was never. How difficult would that be to secure a seat when you've never had that history?
It's not easy.
You know.
Like I did that.
You were the first
Yeah.
NDP seat in your riding.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing because you're up against whatever the people think of the party. And you don't know if that's good or bad depending on what's going on. It can mean different things. I think with Ashlyn and Mike, the harder piece is that the Greens don't have that long history. So whenever we start talking about the history of what happened at Queen's Park, theirs is a fairly
clean.
You know what I mean? But that also, on the one hand, there's newness and opportunity, and on the other hand, there's the inability to sort of fight against the bigger stories that we have about the other parties, right? But they're holding on, and I think a lot of it has to do with their speaking in community, and once the election is done, they're ready to work across the table. They're working with people.
Well, what honestly, and either one of you can interject, what can you do with 2 seats?
A lot.
Okay, tell me, what can you do? There's
Literally.
124.
So if you think about some of the bigger changes that have happened in community, I think that a lot of them have been times where we've been courageous enough to lose even. So in the history, like in legal history, there's a reason why you gather and you still put cases forward knowing that you're going to lose them. But you keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it because you're making public a bigger issue. And at some point, the pressure from community pushes the system to change. And so they can speak out. They can stand up for community, and they can demonstrate a different way of doing politics by working. They only have 2 seats. They have to make friends in other parties. And by doing those kinds of things, you have things like when I was there, we had the Emancipation Month Act. August is now Emancipation Month. That was 4 parties that co-signed that bill. That had never happened before.
Just 4 parties?
It was because there's a maximum of 4 people.
Oh, 4 people or 4 parties?
4 parties.
Oh, okay. So there was a good collaboration.
Yeah. So it was the Greens, it was Mike, it was myself as the NDP. There was a Conservative and a Liberal that co-sponsored that bill. And we passed it over the course of a day. And so when you start to do, and it was actually, Mike was one of the core people that was helping to bring this group of us together. And so when you start to do that kind of collaborative work, you demonstrate that it's possible to do politics differently, and that elections can actually be the end of the fighting, you know? It's possible.
And a voice for change too. I think it's actually kind of fun that in this riding that we are hyper-local, 9 ridings, 2 of which are green. Which are the 2 seats that are currently that have been currently won? So we'll see if we get any more on this. So your thoughts on 24 seats for NDP?
Honestly, I don't know what it says. I can't tell. I think this was more about the Liberals gaining, the fact that they were not even a party. I think with new leader and the concern with the ads that were created to hurt people instead of build up your own party.
Well, they've lost so far. They're going to lose 4 seats.
Yeah, so they've held on. I would say that they've held on. And the leader is, I don't think the leader's in trouble. I think the leader is going to be accepted, and I think the leader is going to be respected, and they're going to continue. After every election, almost every party, if I'm not mistaken, has a review process.
I would hope so.
So they do a review and they say, okay, so do we still want to keep the leader? I don't think any one of them are going to say no to their leaders, because they've either gained or held on. Because there was a scenario that was playing out for a while that it was going to be a devastation of the NDP, and the Liberals were going to just vault ahead. The other one was the Liberals are going to gain enough to get party status, and the NDP are going to stay put, and they're going to get a few more seats for the Tories, which seems to be playing out. So not much is going to be dramatically different. So then you get to ask that question: why did we have an election?
Well, arguably PC at the time the writ was dropped was 79.
79.
Yeah, we're at 79 right now. So it's interesting because they've dropped in seats. They had 83 in 2022. And it's interesting with the Liberal Party as well. I said something that's incorrect. I said it was 9 for official status. It's 12. 12.
Yeah.
They had 9 seats. That's where
Yes.
the 9. Now they're one over.
They're one over.
That's what they needed. So they have.
Night's not over.
The
Because
night is
sometimes
not
you
over.
actually lose seats before the end of the night.
So tell us how that would work in electronic.
Well, it depends on the ridings that might not have the electronic delivery. If they've got those ballots, if they start challenging ballots, you can start challenging ballots now. So the scrutineers are going to take a look at this, and they're going to go.
So Bonnie Crombie is a really tight riding,
It's a tight riding.
right?
Yeah. So if she wins, then she's got a seat in the House, and now she gets to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Because right now the Liberals didn't get to ask questions unless the Speaker rotated them in from time
They
to
have
time.
to get permission.
They get permission, and they actually have to have a certain amount of times. And unfortunately, the way the system works, the government House leader gets to dictate whether or not that happens, and the Speaker tends to follow what that they say. So, but the Speaker has enough power that they can go, oh, I'll listen to that person's question,
Right.
from time to time.
Yeah.
And I remember that actually because I remember when they changed the number of seats because the Liberals, there were a couple by-elections, and so then the Liberals got too close, and then they were like, oh, well, we'll just
Make it
increase
12.
that. I remember that. And I do remember that there were times where it was a good political idea, it was strategic to allow the independents to speak more. Because they didn't want because when they give more time to the independents, then that's less time to the official opposition, right?
Absolutely.
So
It's a strategy.
everything is a fun game.
Well, we're here in Crombie. It's so tight there's that Crombie may not win.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that tight, which is very interesting. Yeah, it's
I would imagine that the PCs poured a lot of money into that riding.
well, strategy. There you go. So when you ran for NDP, they had 40 seats at the last election, correct? When you're in approximately.
Just under. I don't think it was as
Okay.
much, but yeah.
So when you go to an election, you must go for some training and things like that.
Nope.
There's no training in terms
There's
of.
not really so I was in
They're
a
just-
slightly
Go
different
ahead, run.
position
Okay.
because I had 12 months. So I had a year, I had Catherine Fife that was mentoring me. She would bring me to events. There was also a change in the boundaries. So at the time that I was running, Catherine used to have Kitchener-Waterloo. And so it was all of Waterloo and this little piece of Kitchener. And then when my name was on the ballot, they changed the riding boundaries. So Kitchener Centre took that little piece. So Catherine could introduce me to people that had voted for her. So I was in a very different situation, and
you
I
had
had
a mentor
time.
and a mentor.
And a mentor. In a situation like this, where it's a snap election, you have 4 weeks, up until February 13th was the last day that you could actually have your name on a ballot. And so where is the mentorship going to come
not gonna happen.
at that point?
Can we talk
So,
about
no,
boundaries? Because that's a
Let's
fact.
talk about
Okay.
boundaries.
There's 120.
Maintain your boundaries, man.
Yeah.
Are there boundaries?
Say my
Okay.
boundaries. Say my
Yes.
There's 126 federal boundaries in Ontario, 124 provincial boundaries. The federal one changes with the census. and the provincial ones they're similar, but I guess up north there's two different boundaries.
We had legislation created when McGuinty was the premier, and the legislation was we'll match the federal boundaries,
but
except...
doesn't that make sense?
Of course, except in the north. They took away ridings, and we had a philosophy of, no, you need more riding and more representation, right? So we kept the north boundaries that we had before and kept the members, and then they actually made more members in the last little while. That's where they ended up with their first native representative.
With Saul.
Yes, yeah. So if it gets tweaked, what happens is we don't match. And one day the MPP shows up and they say, well, I'm your MPP. No, you're not. This guy's my MPP. Yeah. Well, this guy's my MP. No, this guy's my MP. So the legislation made sense to say we'll match the ridings because population makes a difference. Mm-hmm. My riding at one time was one of the largest in Ontario.
Geographically?
Well, no, population-wise, in terms of how many people I represented. It was because of the way the original structure was. It ended up being I got some from here and some from here and some from here. Yep. And I ended up with at one time it was 140,000 representatives for me to represent. 140. Wow. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of others that were larger, but one of them was in the Toronto area, so that's understandable. I had a member that had 4 blocks. 4 blocks was his riding.
In the GTA, or?
Right in downtown Toronto.
Well, as Ashlyn said, it'd be a lot easier to knock on doors if it's 4 blocks. You could probably just keep going around.
It was all high rises.
Wow.
And they had about 89 to 90,000 people.
Yeah. Sorry, can we just say we just saw 2 go down?
Yeah.
So there you go. Talks about. So the PC have now dropped 2.
So that's the counting piece. So
there you go, 25 for the NDP, 14 for the Liberals.
So how do you then determine when they call and said that person won it? It just means that mathematically it's impossible for anyone to come and catch them?
It's the total amount.
Yeah.
Like you have so many electors in that riding. You have so many electors. Let's use the number 10,000. So you got 10,000 people that can vote, and if somebody gets X number of thousand votes, the other person cannot.
Well, in theory, if they get 5,001,
it's mathematic.
Right. Yeah, it's done.
It's mathematic, and sometimes they call it even before that because what they do is they have a big sheet that shows how many votes were cast before, what was the voter turnout, and then they just say we're predicting that it's going to be this person, and sometimes they get it wrong.
Well, and we're seeing it here. It may be wrong. Who knows? The PC party, of course, is 78, which would be down a seat. NDP 26. That will also be down substantially. The Liberal Party is up. Green Party would be the same. And the interesting thing in terms of the independents, because there were several independents that had lost their party status. You mentioned one in Hamilton.
Yep.
There were other ones that were for a variety of reasons that were independent, but obviously not successful. We talked about how hard it is to run in the second time against bigger parties, right? So,
or some retire though, right? Some of the members that got kicked out of caucuses,
just say that's enough.
They're not running anymore. Like Jim Wilson, for example. Jim Wilson just left his seat and said, "I'm done." He'd served for what, almost 30 years.
So, Jim Wilson.
Yeah.
Well, that's not more of a recent one.
No. Okay. That was previous.
But we were talking about Bobby Ann Brady as well.
Bobby Ann Brady is the one that where Hullum and Norfolk did their little shtick about assigning a candidate.
Yeah.
And then Colleen Rashid in Mississauga East, I guess he had a Las Vegas trip that his party didn't like. Why would the PC party just? Let's talk about in terms of he had a seat and they kicked him out to go independent because of this. They have an ethics committee, or how does that happen? Did it happen when you were elected that one of somebody there was?
Yes, actually, Belinda Carajalios, because she had voted against something that the party we had the whipped votes, and she voted against, and so then she sat as an independent, and then now she and her husband are the leaders of the New Blue. And so that happened during that period. There were quite a few, but I don't know if I'm correct in this assumption, but when you have like 79 people to choose from, you can afford to
Fair
just
enough.
be angry in caucus and say, get out.
Well, Vincent Key they kicked out, Rick
saying.
Nichols, so 3 people got, and the PC were...
The leader. It boils down to the leader.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they have somebody, they might have a committee, they might have somebody, the House leader or, the caucus leader, the caucus chair, and they say, well, this guy's being a real pain in our butt. Mr. Leader.
They don't want to be
Mr. Leader, can we get rid of him?
Right.
And that's what they do. It's the leader's responsibility to make the decision.
Yes, and it's very interesting you mentioned it. If you have 79, or you had actually, they had 83.
Yeah.
If you just
They
drop
had
4,
space.
they had
room.
space, room for other ones as well, which is very interesting. We talked about lower turnout as well. I want to go back on this electoral riding. So federally, you corrected me. It's 122. I think I did it the other way.
Yeah.
But federally, there's less, and I'm still confused on why wouldn't they match them. Why would there not be the identical to cause all this confusion?
Right, because of pushback. What happens is when they do the census and then they have the electoral boundary commission, we don't give it to parties. We give it to an independent committee that is nonpartisan. The independent committee at the federal level reviews it and says, we've looked at all the boundaries and we're trying to balance out the rep by pop formula for the country. It still doesn't turn out all that great because some populations are so small and thin.
Right, it's in the north especially.
Right. So what happens is they come back with a recommendation and they say, here's the map the way we've drawn it. These are the ridings for the next election. Then what happens is the parties at the provincial level open the folder and go, oh my God, I'm losing all my votes from the north end of my riding.
Right.
And they're going to push them all over to somebody else's, and I'm going to lose the next election. I want that riding to stay the same. So they have the pushback, and then they may redraw the boundary again, or they say, no, this is the one we're going to have to go with.
Okay.
So it's a consensus-built riding thing, but the provincial government originally had legislation that said, we match, in Ontario, we match the federal boundaries except the north.
Right. Can we talk about one thing that I think is interesting? The PC party had, I'd say, strongly encouraged their incumbents not to go in these debates. And why?
Well, I think many people ask that question.
We talked about that earlier, but I just still don't understand. Were they actually? What happens if they went in a debate?
So I don't know if I'm biased. I'm probably biased.
Okay.
But what I remember when I was at Queen's Park was that in general terms, when there was a debate happening at Queen's Park, the members had a binder and they were reading from the binder. So my experience at Queen's Park with this particular government was not that they were speaking freely to begin with.
Right.
And so it's not all that surprising based on that experience that now when you're in your riding and nobody is watching, that they would not want you to speak, right? Because
well, you got to defend a record, eh?
And towing the party line.
You got to defend a record. I'm at a debate, and somebody from the audience, I would hope, would say, well, what about that $1 billion that you spent?
They do not want to have that conversation.
What about that $1 billion
That's how you avoid it. You just don't.
So
show
you
up.
just don't go.
Right. It's like friends that ghost me. We ghosted. Okay, we're wrapping it up things, viewers. Again, we'll wrap it up here. I want to get some final thoughts.
Yes.
So if you want to give me some final thoughts.
I'll do this very quickly. I want people to get more involved so that whatever we can do on the legislative side, on the political side, on the social side, if there's anything that we can do to engulf an energy of getting involved, we need to do it. It's that simple. Please get involved. So please, please, please get those votes up. Make sure that you participate. You can go on social media all you want and be an idiot. Like, I think that's a crazy place. But having said that, if it engages me to get upset enough to go and vote, then go vote. I don't want to use foul language. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be visceral. I just want to simply be able to have that conversation to go. So everybody, please use this as a lesson to keep voting.
Right.
That's the important part of our democracy. The last piece to this is, I really want people to pay attention with critical thinking. We seem to have lost, particularly in the United States, but here we're losing our ability to use critical thinking. What this guy's telling me is it was okay to spend $600 million to $1 billion to get out of a contract that was going to be up in 12 months. So if I had waited on sat on my hands for 12 months, I would have been able to put $1 billion into my healthcare system instead of spending it on corporate fat cats that made a lot of money on whiskey. I'm sorry, that issue alone tells me that they should have been going to those all candidates meetings to hear people say, why did you waste $1 billion that when you make me wait?
So get out and vote is your
Get out and vote.
And final thoughts on your shirt.
Final thoughts on my shirt. I'm trying to accumulate 365, so I've got one for every day of the year.
Oh, I love
Well,
it.
he's got his summer. There's summer.
Oh, I'm
in a
summer. I'm
nutshell.
ready.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for
Do
this.
I get thoughts on the shirt?
You have thoughts on
I
everything.
love it.
Yes, we do. I told
I
him I
do.
had shirt jealousy. Okay, so please give me some final thoughts.
My final thoughts are this. The election is over, but our democratic system is not. Our democracy and the part of what we have to do as members of this democracy, our job still continues. I worry sometimes that we get despondent. So yes, we have low voter turnout, but we also get despondent after and we think that the only job we have is to vote. Actually, your job continues. Every single decision that's being made at Queen's Park is a decision that you have a say in. And so that means figuring out who your elected representative is now for this, since this new election, and getting their phone number and getting their email and making sure that you're paying attention. Now is the time to send in the letters. Now is the time to sign petitions. Now is the time to tune into whatever the fancy channel is to watch them at Queen's Park, because this is what the democracy is. And part of our problem, I think, is that after the election, we stopped watching them. I couldn't believe some of the things that were happening at Queen's Park. But if people were watching us, then perhaps they would be saying, you shouldn't be acting that way, or you shouldn't be speaking to each other this way, or all of that kind of stuff. And so don't let this be the end of the story. Let this be the beginning of what this new democratic process will look like.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you as well. It's
pleasure.
great surrounded by the experience that you've both had serving your ridings. Thank you for serving as well. I'm Peter Maranger, and we're going to wrap it up early because we have officially called this election the majority, of course, as you can see on the screen, for the Progressive Conservative Party. And I guess we talked about their snap election strategy. In this case, did work for them. So for those people that have won and secured your seats, congratulations once again. And I'm sure you're exciting and enjoy your late night parties tonight. Thanks for watching and make it a great day. Okay, super.
You're listening to Stingray Music.